if everybody's ready, I'll call the meeting to order. This is the regular monthly meeting, January 2016. The first item on the agenda is the consent agenda, which includes the minutes of the December 21 meeting, the new historic district property owners, and administrative COAs. Is there a motion to accept the consent agenda?
I so move.
And a second?
Second.
Those in favor, aye?
Aye.
Opposed? So moved. On our action agenda, we have a request for a COA after the fact by Kurt Schultz. We've been advised that he is not able to attend today. We do have the COA for an after-the-fact approval to replace roof finials at 316 Harrison Street. Ordinarily, we are reluctant to discuss a COA when the applicant is not here. I believe he has advised staff that he would like us to review it.
Well, let me read you what the
All right.
correspondence was today, and then you can make your decision.
Okay.
So he sent me an email today at 2:16 p.m., sent it to me, Ms. Craig, said, Dear Robin and Tom, I simply can't get into the city today. I spent an hour digging out my truck, but the road itself is covered in snowy ice and my tires just spin and spin. I live at 623 Riverside Drive. Take a look via Google. Tom, if you're willing to present for me, my case is as follows. At 316 Harrison, one of the finials was completely missing and the other one was rotted and just hanging there by a nail. The wood was significantly disintegrated. I found two posts, which I thought were appropriate finials, mounted them in the openings where it appeared that finials had been, and flashed and sealed the roof around them. See photographs supplied with my COA. I apologize for not getting this pre-approved. I'll admit that it never crossed my mind, as I felt that what I was doing was completely appropriate. That is, mounting finials where finials had been previously. Also, I've been working long and hard on getting the exterior compliant, and yet Wayne Craig and the city judges are continually pursuing me to pressuring me to finish. Even though I've done more than anyone in the neighborhood over the past few years, I am being threatened with a $500 fine, and the exterior isn't finished by February 19th, 2016. When I stated that would be very difficult and that I'm doing the renovation right, caulking all the seams, priming, and then painting, etc., Mr. Craig stated in front of the judge, quality doesn't matter, all we care about is that you finish. I'm between a rock and a hard place, with one branch of the city challenging every detail of what I do and the other stating that the details don't matter, just get it done. It's simply unfair and unjust. I will not repeat my numerous claims against Miss Butterfield, but she single-handedly pushed me and my family out of the house and continually antagonizes all of us on the block by using the city's various rules, regulations, and ordinances for her petty agenda, whatever that is. At some point, the city needs to recognize her type and not jump every such time one files a complaint. Sorry for my absence. Will appreciate you pleading my case. I replied to Mr. Schultz at got a wrong time on it, but I replied to him after that, and it said, Mr. Schultz, I will ask the commission what they would like to do. Typically, they want the representative at the meeting. It may need to be postponed until next month. We'll let you know. So at first, he asked me to represent it. I told him that typically you guys want them at the meeting, and he responded back and said, next month will be fine. Thanks for your quick response. So I think he's fine to postponing it next month if that's what you would like to do. Typically, you can the ordinance says you're supposed to act on it within 30 days of receipt. So if you table it until next month, I think you'll be fine.
All right. Well, I think it has been our practice to make every attempt to have the applicant present, because there may be questions, and I think in this case there probably are. And so I will entertain a motion to postpone, or I should not say postpone, but table this application until February's meeting. Is there a motion to that effect?
I have a question.
All right, let's hear a
Can I
question.
make it before your motion? Can I ask my question first? What if he doesn't show up at the next meeting?
Then I think you need to act on it.
Yeah, I think we would be prepared
Today,
to act then.
that street, I live next door to it, that street is impassable. Our street's impassable unless you have four-wheel drive, so.
Well, I mean, the fact is, he's out of compliance with the historic district ordinance and the guidelines, and we've put a stop work order on him. He's come to the commission asking for approval of an after-the-fact COA. If you grant it, he'll be fine. If not, then he has 15 days to appeal it to council. If he does not do that, we will pursue court action. So that's how that works.
Well, I think, from what I've heard, he is asking to schedule it for the February meeting so he can be here. Is that correct?
That is correct.
All right, then I think we should grant that. And if he's not here for the next meeting, then we deal with that. Okay?
I'm just thinking, with the stair rails, he was coming and then he didn't come, it's.
Right.
Well, but then he withdrew it, and he had not done that work yet. He's done
Okay.
this work.
I didn't
Yeah.
realize that.
Mhm.
Okay, I'll be quiet
Okay.
now.
All right, so is there a motion to table this until the February meeting?
I'll make a motion to table this application until next meeting in February.
Okay, is there a second?
Second.
Motion made and seconded to table this COA until February meeting. Any other question or discussion? Hearing none, I'll call for a vote. Those in favor, aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, thank you. There is one other item of business that's not on the agenda, and I will take that up at this time. And at the last meeting, we tabled a COA from an applicant who could not attend that meeting. And so we postponed from December to January. He has been in communication with staff and made it clear that he is not available until February. And so here again, we have a tabled COA that we should act on today, but we also have a communication from the applicant asking to be heard in February. Is that correct, staff?
Correct.
Okay.
Yes.
So,
This is the painting the addition.
Correct.
Done.
yeah,
Similar situation, but he just painted a portion of it. He hadn't painted the entire thing yet, so.
all right. Is there a motion to table this until the February meeting?
I move that we table it to the February meeting.
Second?
Second.
All right. Any question or discussion on this one? Hearing none, I'll call for a vote. Those in favor, aye.
Aye.
Opposed? All right. The other item on the agenda is a request for comment on the Courthouse Hill Downtown Historic State and National Boundary Expansion. And I'll ask our staff for clarification on this in terms of our comment. They asking for a formal vote and position, or is this strictly open comment to be forwarded? How is this to be handled?
I don't think it needs to be a formal vote, but just discussion and consensus on whether or not the commission has any concerns or comments with the proposal. You're getting this because Lynchburg is a certified local government. Just looking at the boundaries, I, as staff, have a couple of options, or not options, but concerns on why they left some things out on the boundaries that you may want to discuss. Other than that, I think it's a very reasonable proposal. And there's also going to be a public meeting on this in this room on
February 11th
February 11th.
from 5 to 7.
Now, will this involve tax credits and good stuff
Yes,
like that.
it would place it on the state and national register, which would allow the building owners to get state and federal tax credits.
Would it be a local district?
No, it would not be a local district. It would just be an expansion of the existing boundary of the Courthouse Hill downtown boundary.
Okay. Well, let me open the discussion with that, because we have the application, which includes a great deal of detail about the properties involved, and ask if perhaps the applications committee maybe has looked at this and would like to give us an overview and open the discussion with any comments or questions.
We have, and I don't have any objections to it. My comment would be, my concern would be the garage on Commerce, the parking garage. And according to one of our members here, I forget who told me this, that there are structural issues with that garage?
I think there might be. I've overheard, nothing solid.
And it's not exactly a great building. And so if it's on the register, does that mean it could never be altered? It has to stay exactly like it is? I'm just curious as to why that was included.
I thought that it would be judged, if it was included on the register, it would be judged just like any other building within that district. So the register's not necessarily saying it's a building of great architectural history or significance, but that when you go to replace it, probably the importance of it being on the register is that when someone decides to replace that garage or repair it, their application is judged using the same guidelines as the neighbors. So it creates a consistent guideline for the neighborhood. Right now, with those missing gaps, it seems as though the neighbors have to follow the guidelines that suit the whole community and the historic nature of that neighborhood, but then these certain buildings are released from that requirement. So by including it in that district, I assume that will help to make it more consistent, and any replacement building would be viewed with a little more care for the overall historic neighborhood.
Well, I think that would be true perhaps if this was a non-contributing building, but it is listed as contributing, which would change that. If it's a contributing building, I don't think they can alter it, let alone tear it down and replace it without considerable difficulty.
Well, so what I'm understanding you to say, Mr. Morris, is if the parking garage on Commerce Street is listed as a contributing structure, if they apply for state and federal tax credits, then they will look at that building's appearance now and they will want it to remain the way it appears now.
That would be my take on it.
And,
I could be wrong.
that is a very valid concern. So let's kind of take a step back. And what does the state and national district do, right? That means if there's any federal project or any city project with state or federal money on it, it has to go through a review by DHR. If the owner wants to do any repairs, they can apply for and possibly receive state and federal tax credits for it, as long as the work is done within the guidelines. If they don't want to try and use state and federal money, they can tear that building down, they can do whatever. If they do tear it down, the building that goes back is not going to be subject to any regulations at all, because there'll be no federal or state money that really goes into it. So if the commission agrees with you, I think one of the things we can write back to them is the concern of the appearance of the building now and whether or not it's really a contributing building.
Right,
to
because
the-
they have two garages, two parking garages involved in this. The other one is the one next to the Y. They list that one as non-contributing.
Mhm.
This one is contributing.
Correct.
I mean,
So that's the type of thing we can write back and tell them as a concern.
Okay, any other comment on that particular matter or others? I think you began with, there might be a question about what properties are not included and others. I'm a little bit confused on the line. Now, you said this is not a local historic district. Maybe that answers my
If you
que-
look in your Dropbox, I added a map called Boundary Increase.
Yes.
Late this afternoon, and it
Yeah.
might give you a little bit better idea.
Okay. Let me,
so if it's not local, it
It's
does not
just-
come under our,
Correct.
oh, okay, all right. Well, then,
But the map shows you the state and national boundaries only.
okay.
And I was a little confused as why they did not include the building at 11th and Commerce. I believe that was the former
That was the old Lynch's Landing.
Lynch's Landis, why that building was not included.
Right.
is that something else we might want to address?
Well, and then this butts up right to Diamond Hill. And if you look at the map, you see that Church Street, the remainder of Church Street, not that this is a big deal, but the remainder of Church Street is included either in Diamond Hill or the courthouse, but they left that one little section of Church Street out. So I would think the boundary should just be extended across the street. But it just seems like there's, even if this was adopted, it seems like there's just a bunch of little holes in the district that
Yeah.
it ought to just be filled in.
How can we best approach that without saying specifically which properties, which parcels should be included? Can we ask, comment that a review be undertaken such that the boundaries are, I don't know if contiguous is the right word, but,
Well, I think,
see-
I understand. I think the best thing to this point is if the commission supports this with the concern that Mr. Morris outlined, is we can present that, but also just state support for filling in some of the boundary gaps. And I don't see a reason for not listing those properties
Okay.
individually, and including a map showing what they are.
okay.
I would think that the state is going to want a nomination form done on those properties, and that's either, typically you have an outside consultant do those nomination forms.
Are
Because Hill
these-
Studio that did this one. But we can list it and see what their response is.
Okay. Were these initiated by the property owners?
I believe this was initiated by the property owners, yes.
Do you have any reason to know whether indeed they contacted those adjacent property owners and perhaps they opted out?
I cannot answer that. I did ask for a representative from Hill Studio to come today, and I guess
Okay.
they didn't. So all that being said, from a staff perspective, I think expanding the boundaries are a good thing. There's really no negatives to it, except the one.
Yeah, I
But
think
we
that-
would like to see the holes filled in.
I think that's what I'm hearing as a consensus, no objection to the expansion in principle, the comment about the parking garage, but that perhaps it's not complete as it's drawn.
I know when our neighborhood became a historic district, it was, the criteria was, it was the way the houses all worked together. I mean, you didn't just cherry pick certain houses and make them historic. It was the way they all worked together. Now, is that what they're trying to do here, or there, certain owners want to have access to the tax credits, and that's why they want to be included?
Does it might help, I don't know if they're maybe just two completely different things, but, excuse me, but I am curious, are boundaries overlaid with theirs? You know, what we call the courthouse district versus what they're calling it? I don't know, I just think I always wonder from like a realtor standpoint, if they go to sell something and they feel like it's all over the place, like they say to someone, oh, your building's not in it, and then they find out later that the two districts don't match up. I don't know, Tom, does that?
I think it's that our district would be the overlay district.
Mhm.
Yeah, if I could get it on the screen, I could show you.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, I guess we can just put GIS.
You can.
It's hard to compare the two.
But, I mean, if you look at downtown and the lower basin, none of that is in a local district. But it is in the state and national, which does make the tax credit available. Fifth Street's the same way. None of that's in a local district, but it is in state and national, so. I mean, the real teeth are at the local level, as you know.
So who administers this? I mean, is this extra work for staff?
No, there's no work for staff. This is all administered at the state and national level.
And do they go through the DHR for approval of what they're going to do?
Oh, yeah, this letter came to us from DHR.
Okay.
They're asking for your comment as a certified local government. So if Lynchburg wasn't a certified local government, we wouldn't even have a chance to comment.
Other than commenting on this, we're only involved if someone has a property within this designated area that is seeking tax credits, then it comes to us.
That's my understanding, yes.
We've had those from time to time.
I pulled up our district, and there's huge gaps on ours, too. Again, it seems like that kind of cherry picking, some buildings are in, some are not. And I guess it does, again, kind of lead to, especially on Main Street, a number of things on Main Street are not in there. Of course, I mean, I understand it with some, like Genworth is huge and a 1970s building, so it doesn't comply with anything in particular. But there's a number of streets, like even on Madison, number of houses, I should say, on Madison Street that are definitely historic houses, so I don't know, very old houses, actually. So I wonder, not to go out of our way to make more work, but I guess Tom, are there different times that this group reviews our historic districts, or is that a planning and zoning issue? Or does it take an outside consultant like Hill Studio to do that?
Typically, to do the survey work that's necessary, you would get an outside firm to help do that. We don't have the staff resources to do it. Obviously, this commission could initiate the expansion of our district or the creation of a new district, just knowing full well we do not have the resources or the funding to have the survey work done at this point.
And not everybody considers it an advantage to be in a local historic district.
That's true.
But this is not local.
No, but the one
Yeah.
that you're talking about is.
Yeah, there might have, I I'm sure there were reasons why they said we're gonna keep certain houses out of this district. Maybe financial, tax-based reasons for,
Well, there's some
They might
natural
felt-
dividing lines, like for ours, it was Fifth Street.
But the line of the existing district seems to meander, well, just if you look at the map, it's not obvious why some are in or some are out. And the line runs along some, let's see, how is it? It was my understanding, and maybe this is specific to a local district, that you don't have properties on one side of a street in and properties on the other street not in the district. That the lines, unless it's requested by a property owner, the lines run between streets.
That's correct. And if you look at our current Courthouse Hill district, it typically picks up the properties that just front on Court Street, is the way the local.
So it's different than this.
Yes.
Okay.
It mainly picks up the properties that just front on Court. It goes back mid-block.
Well, let me ask the commissioners how you'd like to comment.
I would like Mr. Morris's question to be addressed, because I think it's very valid that we don't want to be penned in if this community doesn't view that as a significant building, or maybe the building's a hindrance, because I've seen in areas like Stanton or Atlanta, Georgia, where they take a parking garage and they do some very wonderful revitalization things where maybe the first 50 feet or maybe not 50, but 40 feet are commercial, since Commerce Street has these huge gaps where just nothing happens. So it'd be nice if the owner of that parking garage someday wanted to do something like that, he wasn't completely,
So maybe we need the definition of contributing versus non-contributing, and what can and cannot be done with those buildings. I noticed most of the non-contributing buildings that they put in here, some of them are old buildings, but they have that, what do you call it, the front facades with the, what do you call that, skirts, skins, what do they call those? Those
yeah, I think it's still just, oh, slip covers. They
slip
call them
covers, that's what I
slip
was
covers. That was a good idea, neat term.
So, and so it states right in there, what they sent us, that those hopefully will be restored at some point, being put on the register, for tax credits, so, but that's exactly right. If someone wanted to improve that property, what could they or could they not do? Or are they stuck with the 1949 facade and that can't be changed? And I think they even classify that as no classification. It's not even given a style, any type of architectural style. So why are we trying to preserve something that's not even a?
Right. Tom, did they also ask for input from the Planning Commission and from, I know they probably didn't ask from Economic Development, but I would love to hear Economic Development's comments on it as well, and the Planning Commission, because they may feel like we've really got some things that we'd like to happen there, that we'd like to encourage the building owner or developers to do. But again, if that specific building is, not allowed to be changed, we could run
Well,
into problems.
I think obviously economic, I'm hesitant to speak for them, but the city's is obviously concerned and is encouraging the redevelopment of downtown, right? That's a given. All properties downtown, we're encouraging redevelopment and reuse of them. I think what this board is tasked to do is whether or not the properties are worthy of being listed on the state and national register because of their historic significance. Now, I agree it's not the most attractive building in the world, but does that mean it's not historic? And does that mean that it shouldn't be preserved? That's the question you have to ask.
And I think just because it's historic doesn't mean that it's necessarily a great building. Because
Well-
there are many buildings that are, what is it, 50 years old or older? Yeah, well.
Well, and that's what you're tasked with.
Yeah.
with
And there's already, there's already a parking garage there on that street. So that street, I guess the problem with that street is there's all these parking garages. So I don't know if that's what we're trying to preserve there.
Well, let me ask another question. When does the 60-day clock start? It says we have 60 days to comment. From the date of the letter on this?
They say all comments will be forwarded to the SHPO director and the boards on Thursday, March the 17th.
Okay.
So if you wanted me to try and get some more information from them, we could bring it back to you in February.
Okay. You said there's a public hearing
There is a
scheduled?
public meeting on February 11th from 5 to 7, which is before your next meeting.
That's not a hearing, that's a public
It's
meeting.
a public meeting, but if the commission wanted to attend that and ask questions, most certainly you could do that. And that's in this room, correct?
Yes.
So that's right here in this room.
Okay.
Could you send that out to us, the time, date, place?
Let me suggest this then, since we do have a little time, and since there is an opportunity to ask questions at a public meeting, and I think I heard our secretary volunteer to get more information, that we make clear to him what our questions are. The parking garage is pretty clear. We've talked about that. I think there's no question. In terms of properties that it might be extended to include, why don't we make those known to our staff? We don't have to decide that right now, but you can make that known. And we encourage staff input on that as well.
Yeah, I think if we all have a little more time to kind of review this,
Yeah.
we'll probably come up with more questions, and I think the public meeting would be great.
So
It
why
is-
don't I pose the question to DHR, what the process would be if one of the comments of the commission is that it should be expanded to include more
Okay.
properties. In the meantime, if the commission wants to take a little bit more time and look at the maps and maybe identify some additional properties,
Okay.
that would be helpful.
Thank you.
You're asking them, can you find out if people can opt out if they want to?
Yeah, I believe they can, but from reading the material, but I'll ask that again.
Well, I mean, if you're confident in that, that's my question.
I don't mind asking again.
With all the renewal that's going on, particularly in that lower, I guess you call it the basin, lower basin area and along Commerce Street, is there a reason why there has not been a local historic district designated in that area?
Why a local district hasn't?
Yeah. Is it not necessary with the federal?
It's been attempted before, and I don't have a good answer for you why it wasn't.
Has anybody done the research?
It was back in the early 90s when it was done, and I think that, I think that the thought may be that it may be too restrictive on people to redo the buildings downtown, and it might stymie redevelopment.
With the rehabilitation of those large structures down on Jefferson Street into lofts that were the flower plant, and I'm not sure what else was down there, that those people right now are not receiving or eligible for tax credits because they're not in either the historic district or a local. Is that-
The Piedmont Mill building? That's in, isn't it?
According to this, it's in there.
Yeah, that's in there, so they are eligible.
And we were with the Craddock Terry when we redid that building.
Yeah,
And I think that's the thing, on these large buildings in downtown, really,
okay.
I mean, if you think about it, really to make it feasible to rehabilitate them, the state and federal tax credits are such an important part, you're gonna get the DHR review anyway. It's really the smaller buildings where it's an issue. Where on the local level, the single-family homes, you're not gonna get state and federal tax credits, and that's why it's so important to have a local district.
So is there a coordinated oversight on development along Jefferson Street, particularly, I'll mention that, or Commerce Street?
Well, the way it works now, if they're seeking state and federal tax credits, they would have to go through DHR for approval, and they review it. Even if they do that, and even if they don't, the way the ordinance reads is properties that are zoned B4 and B6 have to go through what's called a design review board process. That is purely an advisory board. Basically, you look at it and offer them recommendations, and they can choose to accept those recommendations, or they can choose to ignore them.
Now, that's like we are, right? It's local volunteers, or is it city staff?
The design review board?
Right.
It's the chair of the planning commission, the chair of the HPC, and 2 other members. That's the way that's the way it works now.
That's about to be changed, is it not?
And that is about to be changed to where, it's more of a regulatory requirement that they follow the commercial guidelines. There's a little bit more teeth, but really not a lot. The way the ordinance is worded is if they follow them, it exempts them from certain landscaping requirements, so it makes it a little bit cheaper. But I mean, quite frankly, the design review board really hasn't, I'm not sure where it's been that beneficial in having it downtown. It's just a matter of, it delays the project, it takes your time, it takes staff time, and 99% of the time, they're not gonna follow it. We tell them exactly the same thing the board does, and they're gonna do, because there's no requirement to follow it. The reason that was put in place, it was put in place at the response of when it was tried to make downtown a local historic district. They said, no, we won't do that, but we will make it an advisory area. It really didn't accomplish anything. I mean, I guess you could argue that the design review board could appeal to someone's census, but I haven't seen that happen. So Mr. Bonert is correct. The new ordinance will make it a little bit more incentivized to follow the commercial guidelines.
But still, the DHR would have oversight to an extent,
Only if there's state and federal tax credits involved.
right?
Right. So what I'm talking about is those projects where there are no tax credits involved.
They just do whatever they want to do.
Well, right. So now, if it's downtown, which is an area zone B4, B6, and there's no tax credits involved, we still require it to go through a design review board process. Sometimes they're doing what the guidelines say, so we just approve that administratively. If they aren't following the guidelines, we would send it to a design review board meeting. The design review board will provide comment, and the petitioner could say, thank you, we appreciate your comments, but we're not gonna follow them. What the new ordinance does is it does away with that design review approval, but says if you don't follow the guidelines, you're still gonna have to plant all this landscaping that was required somewhere. So it gives them, basically it gives them a financial incentive to follow the guidelines, is what it does. But in turn, makes the process a little bit quicker in that there's not another meeting to go through.
Do you have what you need from us on this matter of the,
I think so. I think I have a good
Extension
idea of
boundaries.
what the commission's concerns are. I will contact DHR and see if I can get some,
okay, and if we can ask you to alert us to the public meeting?
meeting date. We'll send out an email with that date
Okay.
and time.
Thank you. Under old business, we have been dealing with updates to our guidelines. We have several matters having to do with painting, house colors. I'm not sure where we are on the backyard fencing, and we also have driveway pavers that,
Didn't we finish the backyard fencing?
There was some recommended language.
yeah,
That's
did
in
we
your
adopt that
minutes.
last time? Okay,
So it's
That's fine.
basically the paint colors and the
yeah, driveway
Pavers.
pavers, okay.
And my
Uh,
apologies about the paint colors, but Rick and I just haven't
That's-
gotten together.
That's fine. I just want to say this, we need to conduct some discussion on that, and so we would like to have some recommendations from those who are drafting some language. And if you would make that available to us before the meeting at which you'd like to have that discussed, we can do that. I'm advised that we do need to publish this as a public hearing and conduct that public hearing, and then we can adopt the final amendments to the guidelines. They don't go to city council as they used to. Okay?
Correct. That does not mean you can't discuss the items beforehand
Sure.
and draft them, but before you officially adopt them, we're advising that you conduct a public.
Yes, I would like to have that discussion and have something solid before we have a public hearing. All right, so just ask that when, at such time as you're prepared, and I know that Commissioner Deanich has drafted something on the pavers.
I was told to bring them to this meeting, so.
Okay.
This is just draft. And I sent Tom and Robin a PDF of this that they could distribute to everyone. But when we looked through some of the pavers, and this is just,
Yeah,
the first draft at it. When we looked at the pavers, there's a number of pavers that we think are suitable depending on the situation in the historic district. So the left side of the page shows some pavers that would probably work pretty well. The right side of the page shows some pavers, the bottom shows like a stripe effect that's very strong and might detract from other historic, installations. Like if you had the one on the bottom right side next to a beautiful cobblestone historic landscape feature, it would really take away from that. So we're saying that might be one that, we should, give some examples of why that'd be a less attractive way to go and less in keeping with the historic district. Then the one paver that across the board has been very problematic through the years is what's called, by a trade name, grass pave. And it comes in two forms, either a black plastic matrix that's put down over a mixture of sand and topsoil, and then grass seed is spread and it's supposed to grow. Then the other type is a concrete matrix that's put down, and again, grass seed is supposed to grow. And what we've seen over the years, because we've been watching that type of paver for about 15 years in different installations, is it's always extremely inconsistent. Sometimes the grass grows, sometimes it doesn't, and it can look really unattractive. And then it's incredibly difficult to fix it. you'd have to pull up all of it, because the reasons why the grass doesn't grow in some areas, tree roots might be sucking away too many nutrients and water. There might be compacted soil that happened during construction, so the grass just is very unhappy there. So you get these bald patches. And so I would say that I think in general, in the historic district, it would not be a good idea, because the homeowner may look at the product literature from the company and say, that looks fabulous, but the reality is, it's very unattractive, and then it would, possibly take away from other, I'll just drop this off over here, would possibly take away from other installations that are done in a more historically appropriate way.
I just put that in your Dropbox.
I see it, just came out.
Oh, is it the one that I just sent? Because I had some better wording in the one that was just sent, if you could. The one that was sent around 4 o'clock has improved wording over the one sent at 2:30. Sorry about that.
Okay. Well, thank you. I'd like to just hold this in our file. We'll take this up and we talk about the changes to the,
The paint.
yeah, we'll take that, the paint. Is there anything else that we want to take up by way of change to the guidelines? Or we have everything we need on the other issues? Yes.
There was one other that I think I could just maybe address with wording, is an applicant came through a couple months back, I think in the November meeting, and was, the guidelines talk about railing design being different than what is there now. And I realize that the intent of the guidelines is that any new construction be distinct from old, so that it doesn't look like a house that had a porch wrapping the front had the same porch wrapping the back if that was built, today, and this was built in 1910, the front. So, but I don't think we should discourage people from using some of the same architectural language. If you have a house with a really strong language of baluster design or craftsman style, I think you would want to continue that, but there's ways to very clearly differentiate the old from the new, but it doesn't have to be a different baluster design, because I think it could be a real detriment when people read that, say, oh, I have to put up black vertical pickets, but the whole rest of the house is craftsman. Why am I doing that? So I think that this committee is certainly capable of deciding the nuance of how did whoever drafted the new edition, did they design it in a way that's different enough that we can all tell that if there was an architectural walking tour, as you see, the back edition was done in recent years and the front was done, in the original. I think that's the intent, but the way the wording is now, it basically says do black vertical pickets, and I think the average applicant would just defer to that rather than say, wow, I could really do something better that improves upon the house and builds on its architectural character. And so there's a Rob Creer book that has some real distinct do this, don't do that as nice suggestions. I think maybe we could have, a few things like that to show how it can be done in an appropriate way, and then also show here's some pitfalls of what would not be appropriate.
Is that specific to the fencing guidelines?
Specific to
Is
the
that-
decks, there's some guidelines about decks and railing. So it's specific to the language that's in there now that I feel is too restrictive and possibly leads people in the wrong direction.
Would you like to draft something that?
Sure, and I think it can
looks
be
better?
mostly verbal, but I can also do the photographic suggestions, and then you folks can look at it and decide if you think those are helpful or not helpful, and then that can be finessed to something that everyone feels makes sense.
Thank you very much. All right, any other business come before the commission?
I'm sorry. Last meeting, there was a request of Mary Harvey at 910 Harrison Street dealing with the door and transom.
Oh, yes, yes.
Two of the commissioners were going to work with her to find out a way to salvage the door. And if they were, they could go ahead and resolve that. I just need to know the status of that, so.
Well, we did go out there.
Who were the two commissioners?
Morris and Rusk. Yeah.
Actually, I ended up going.
Oh, you,
Okay.
So, has she called you?
No, sir.
I think, well, there really wasn't an issue. Her hinges were loose. And so because the hinges were loose, the door wasn't closing properly. And so she thought she needed a new door. So when we went there, she also had a contractor that was going to look at it while we were there, and he did show up. And I think he was a cabinet maker, wasn't he?
Yes.
So I said, well, that's great. I mean, if you got a cabinet maker here, she should certainly know what you're doing. And I think he went back, got his tools, came back and fixed it. The transom, there was absolutely nothing wrong with it. There was some glazing missing on that, and I think a window, and I just told her, I said, if you're getting drafts, I mean, we could clearly see through the glass because the glazing was missing. And I told her, just, these are very simple solutions, it'll save you a lot of money, you just reglaze this. I think, if you tighten up your hinges, and this gentleman was, I think he kind of reassured us that he could get that door to work again. Another reason she thought the door was bad is because some of the veneer was coming loose, which was, again, a minor problem. So I think we convinced her that the door was, there was nothing at all wrong with that door. It could be repaired very easily and a lot cheaper than, tearing it out and putting a new door. We talked about some weather stripping that she could do around the edge of the door. And so hopefully that's, and I told her, I said, look, if there's an issue with it, call back for the, to the commission, and we'll try to look at it a little further and resolve it. But I think if this gentleman thinks he can fix it, I think that's all you need. So if she didn't call you back, I would assume that she got it resolved.
She fixed it. Okay. I'll call her just to follow up on that.
Yeah.
Thank you very
And
much.
I should have told you that, I should have had you, informed you of that, so you could call it, I just,
No,
we didn't.
that's fine. I appreciate it. I just have these things hang out there and it looks like I'm not doing anything.
Yeah.
And then she
Yeah, this was
yells at me.
this was one of these typical things that, no one knew how to use a screwdriver, and it was a very simple fix, as far
Good,
as
you
I
probably
could see.
saved her a lot of money. She was
Yeah.
gonna go get probably a $1,600 door or something and
Exactly.
put it
Well,
on.
this is definitely a happy ending when we do endeavor to work with applicants' COAs to find solutions that work and also may save money. All right, anything else to come before the commission? Hearing nothing, I'll declare the meeting adjourned. Thank you.